Hey yo, what's going on? We're here at B Corp today to talk to you about how bees are in Minecraft versus the real world. How realistic are they? You know, how similar are they? This age-old question is going to be answered today. We're going to run a series of experiments ranging from honey collection to fighting to just learn how bees are in the real world and Minecraft and how well they are represented, because little Timmy needs to know how bees work. Alright, before we start talking about bees, there are many types of bees. These include, there's like actually 20,000 total types of bees, or like species, I guess you could say. And today we're going to be talking about the honeybee, which is the main one represented in Minecraft, most commonly known. It's the one that does the pollinating, does the honey making. Beekeepers love them. They're awesome. And so there's four types of bees within those species, which is more like behavior wise. So there's ones that are parasitic, so they'll invade other hives. So there's ones that prey on the offspring. There's some that sort of steal the job of the queen and then produce their own young, and the rest of the bees are none the wiser. There's the social ones, which are like the honeybee. They make a hive, they build a community, and etc. And then there's the loner bees, which are, as you can tell, loner bees. They're just on their own. They don't really have a community. They're just sort of gather for themselves. And so yeah, that's pretty cool, because there's most people just think of bees as the hive guys, the ones that pollinate, the ones that make the honey, but there's actually a surprisingly unique spectrum of bees, and not all are the same. There's stingless bees, there's actually bees without stings, which is also honestly pretty nice. They do bite because how else are they going to defend themselves? And the reason why a lot of bees have stingers is because they contain important organs to the bee. So they are female exclusive organs. So if you thought all bees had stingers, that's actually false. Only females have them, and they are a modified egg-laying organ. So they're important for reproduction. And so yeah, bees don't live long when they are stingerless. Male bees don't have stingers. So also male bees are surprisingly not the big guys here. So the big important bees are all females. Females are the workers. Females are the ones out and about. Male bees are basically only there for reproduction. Now in Minecraft, we don't really have many differences between bees. They're just sort of there, which makes sense because you just spawn them. But there are a bunch of there's a lot of species of bees. There's different genders and those different roles in those communities. So I could be fine with the fact that they're just using the honeybee. I think everyone kind of gets that. But there's a lot of roles. So in a hive, there are four main types, or main roles that bees have. There are nurse bees, which are in the hive 24/7. They take the nectar that is made, and they make the pollen that is made, and they turn it into royal jelly, which is this, I think you've heard of it. It's this super nutritious substance that they feed to their young. It has a lot of protein, a lot of important nutrients, and so it's really cool because it's basically superfood. It's superfood. And a lot of people have actually said that royal jelly is good for humans too, and that's debatable, but it is proven to be edible, at least for us, and it is very nutritious, so that's good. But in Minecraft, you can see here, I don't really see any royal jelly. There's no item about it. The closest we get is a honey bottle, and that's not really, so I guess we can just assume that it's all being thrown up in here and not really anywhere else. So that I don't think they do very well. They also, next up is the drone bees. So drones are male bees. Are there specifically for reproductive purposes. So they don't have stingers. If you notice, this guy's a little stinger. So basically every single bee outside of the hive in Minecraft has a stinger, which means that every single bee here is female. Which, makes sense, because the only thing that the males do is every so often they will go out from the hive in swarms and go to these little mating areas. So example, I don't know, right here could be an example. And this would be a little mating area where they sort of wait here, and then a queen bee would come from the hive, and she'd make a flight. But this is only when she's very young. And she will make her flight, and then all the males will come up and they'll try and reproduce with her, which is literally the only way that bees reproduce. So that's pretty important. Now, I did lie a little bit when I said that was the only way bees reproduce, because actually, did you know that worker bees can reproduce? They barely ever do it, but it is possible. I think, according to an article, like a research article, by Springer, 99.88% of all offspring is from the queen, because she lays thousands and thousands of eggs, and so that's like super crazy because like one bee, like this bee right here, could do basically all of the hive. Now, sure, she'd be a bit bigger and she'd be in there being taken care of, but yeah, she'd be like she'd be low-key carrying the hive, and that's like that's just insane. And so, I mean, they only really do it when, you know, there's not a queen. They sort of need like some numbers to just ensure that their species, their like colony doesn't die out. But yeah, it's the honeybee colony is like a superorganism. It's been confirmed, like said scientifically, to be a superorganism, which means that basically everything's working in tandem, everything's working together, and it's sort of like each thing has its own role, sort of like a body part. Your arm, you know, you use to grab things, your leg you use to walk, your lung is you use to breathe, and so each bee has its own role, and they don't really ever intrude on other roles, even like basically never. The queen does the reproduction. The workers, the female workers, go out and collect like pollen and nectar for the hive. The nurses nurse the young, and like only the young, like they just nurse the young and feed the queen, and then the males are like reproduce with the queen, and that's like each thing has its own niche, and it never intrudes into other niches, unlike, you know, other like most other species, which will just sort of like in their own colonies. Sure, the mother tends to be the motherly figure, but the father will also care, and like the father usually goes out and like hunts for food, but like sure, they have like their own families, but like the colony is like 20,000-30,000 bees all in one, like doing each following its own niche without any issues. So that's super cool. I think that's really interesting with the bees. Now, the last bee type I don't think I explained was the worker. So the worker is these bees out here. They gather pollen, they gather nectar from flowers, they defend the hive against like predators. Now, in Minecraft, we only really get to see the worker bee, and that's really unfortunate. I really think that a really cool thing they could do would be to like have the hive be able to, you know, you could collect two substances from it. Maybe like you could collect royal jelly. Maybe you have like a new workbench that like lets you take the hive out and like sort of extract royal jelly from it. Sure, extracting royal jelly is a very, very, very difficult process that requires advanced machinery and a lot of care, but I think as like an end game item with like some cool workbench, it could be a really good food source, since it is known as one of the most nutritious substances on. That would be really interesting, and I think it fit into Minecraft's, you know, game mechanics, because like as of right now, you don't really need bees. You get honey, you can get honey blocks. That's really about it. And that's sort of where bees end. They're really cool. I think they're super unique, and they definitely put a lot of time into these mobs, into the hives. But I think that they're a bit underutilized. So yeah, that's really cool. I think that that'd be a great way to implement an important thing about bees into the game. Also, we need to talk about bee reproduction, because, oh my gosh, that's probably the worst thing about the bees. Let's take a poppy, for example. So we take two poppies. We go to B1. This is how they reproduce, by the way. Take one, feed it to you. You have hearts. Take one, feed it to you, and you have hearts. And you know what they do? They go together, and then a baby just appears. That is not how reproduction works. I think I've already said it. The queen bee is the one who does most of the reproduction. You don't just feed them flowers and then they just like summon babies. That's probably the most egregious thing about bees. Like, I can forgive maybe cutting down on the types of bees and the roles of bees, because most of the other bees just like sit in the hive except for the males, and I think it'd be a bit hard to make like an entire mechanic where like bees will, you know, soar out of the hive and then like go to other hives, especially if there's only one hive, so that could be a bit confusing. But like, at least make it so like the hive will like spawn bees or something every so often, because that's just like that's not even like close to accurate. And I know that like Minecraft isn't really the most consistent with its breeding, because like, come on, look at pigs, look at cows, look at horses. You feed them a thing and then they go together. But at least like that makes sense, because they're mammals, and so mammals will like, you know, they'll go together and they mate and then they produce children. This is like not even close. So most of the time the queens are laying eggs, and so I think that they should just have the hive spawn like be like a monster spawner for bees, just like every few seconds like it could spawn a bee, and like that'd be, you know, accurate to like the large amount. And I do agree that they had to like shorten the amount of bees in the hive, because having a few thousand bees all around the place would be like next to impossible to balance, and the bees would have to be too small for that. So I think that that'd be a great way to actually have functioning reproduction of bees, instead of having to like, instead of this random method where I just take a flower, feed it to 2 of them, and then all of a sudden they mate. Now, I'm going to be doing a little thing called how do bees pollinate. So, bee right here, he's just going to be sitting around with the flower, and after a few seconds, he will pollinate it, as you can see. And these are little specks, just like in the real world. You know, I guess he sipped the nectar and pollinated. Well, he's got pollen on him. He's still got to go to another flower to pollinate it. Yeah, but the way pollination works is they go from flower to flower, collecting nectar for the hive, and some pollen from this flower can land on the stigma of this flower, and then that will like fertilize the egg. So the male thing has a little device called, a little part of its body called the anther, and this would be the male, and then it would catch on and then go to this flower, and it would hit the stigma, which is the thing that like catches the pollen, and fertilize the flower and produce seeds, and then that's how the flower would reproduce. So I think that's a pretty good representation. There's one small problem. Is this male? Is this male? We don't know. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change anything. Either way, either side can be pollinated. So, you know, I think that's a point off for Minecraft. But, you know, I guess if they had like significant difference, like there's so much you can do with like a few pixels. But like if they changed the flower design to look like male versus female, I think that would be more realistic. But, you know, builders would probably struggle with that, because, you know, different flower looks could ruin builds. Yeah, and so he was in the hive, and now he's back out, and he's gathering nectar from this flower. So that's sort of basically the main thing that bees do in Minecraft. Now, when enough bees are in here, they will, you know, begin producing honey. So after, I think, a few cycles, this will have a design change, and it will be ready for me to collect it. You may have noticed this hive has honey in it. So we're going to extract the honey without making the bees mad. So, yeah, if I go here, yeah, so here's how we're going to extract honey without making the bees mad. So in Minecraft, what you do is you'll take like a beep, campfire, no, beep, and it's going to smoke right under the hive. Now this smoke will calm the bees down if they don't touch the fire, obviously, but yes, this is actually, I guess, the closest that they can get to a legitimate way for, you know, you to collect honey, because in the real world, yes, this is actually how beekeepers gather honey, is they will, like, you have this little device called a smoker, not like a campfire, but like they'll have like a thing in their hand, and they'll like use it to smoke out the bees and calm them down, or I guess numb them so they don't attack you. Then once that's done, in Minecraft we can just right click, and now we have 2 honey bottles. Perfect. So yeah, that's how you get honey. That's kind of the issue. The smoke thing I think is really awesome, but in the real way that honey is extracted is they basically have these structures that they put in the hive called like supers, and then they will store excess honey there, and so that's the things that you can take out and collect and extract from. So the actual hive, we don't take honey from that. We take honey from the supers. So then we can, you know, input a lot of, in the real world, people will put like one-way gates or bee escapes, or use this like chemical called like anhydride, or, like propionic anhydride benzaldehyde, holy name, and yeah, use a smoker with that. And it is probably the fastest way to do it, but yeah, it's pretty good. And then, or you could just brush the bees off. Anyway, the point is, in the real, in Minecraft, we don't do that. So a great way to do that would be to have like another item, literally called super. You can just sort of, you can put it under the hive, you can put it next to the hive, whatever, and so the bees would, you know, take that, and they when their hive is full of honey, then they would start putting it in super. And so thing that actually already exists in Minecraft called a beehive. So we will put a hive right up there. And we'll put a campfire under here to calm them. Now the bees can go in here and start to make honey. Yep, as you can see. And so this is the player-built way. These things are both basically identical to each other in function, except this you can be made by a player. What I suggest is being able to have like a new structure, like a palette or like super, that you can then put in the bee net hive only to differentiate. And you could put like up to 3 in here. And then once that's done, you can like collect 3. It would take, like, the more supers you put in here, the longer it would take for the thing to fully fill up. But you could collect when like it's a third full, and so they could like have little indicators that show 1/3, 2/3 full. And then the player could collect up to 3 bottles of honey. So this would be the better way to make honey versus this one, because this is natural. And so this would be the main way to get honey, is you can just like have 3 bottles of honey stored in here. But one thing that in the real world, the way you make honey is you take the supers out, then you put them in a machine. And then that machine will like spin them around, like the supers, and then all the honey will get flung out, and then you can like collect and mess with the honey. And so yeah, that's how you actually get honey. So what I suggest is you're able to take those supers, take the solid supers out, take them into a like spinner, or like a spinner or something like that, and then it will, take some fuel and spin around for a while, and then come out with some honey. And so if you put a bottle, like sort of like a brewing, where if you put a bottle here and you put the thing here, like the super here, then you have like a source here, it will spin out, and then it can come into 3 bottles. Which would actually be really easy to implement, because they already have the brewing stand right there. You could just take that and just have another block that does that, but with honey. So that'd be super easy, and I think it'd be much more realistic, because it would actually make sense now. And it'd add a little bit more depth to honey farming, other than I can like walk up to hives and just like throw a campfire under, grab a glass bottle, grab some honey, and then leave. Like you don't go to the cave, mine ores, and then just say, oh yeah, I have the ores now. I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. You have the furnace. So it'd add an extra step of processing, and it would probably, I think, add a lot more depth to bees. Now, what's next? We've got how they make honey in the first place. So, I think we've already gone over the fact that bees will just gather nectar and pollen from the flowers. We can see it with the pollen, and they'll go in the hive, and then all of a sudden honey comes. So, honey making is actually a surprisingly cool process, because trophallaxis is this thingy-mabobber, where they just sort of transfer it from, the bee to the worker, to the, worker bees in the hive. And then it gets turned into sugar for storage, then gets spread over honeycombs so that it can evaporate, sort of how, like, a fridge would, remove all the moisture. A fridge tends to be, dry to remove moisture so that things like mold can't grow on it. And so then it evaporates to prevent, molding food fermentation. So then it can be stored for, like, a long period of time. A very long period of time. And so it will get sealed with a wax cap, and they use this as a food source during the winter months. But it's actually really interesting, because, frankly, it's a lot like modern refrigerator. Like, we have a refrigerator. Refrigerator keeps things not moist, and then it can store them for a long time. Same thing with honey. They lay it out, it evaporates, so all the water goes away, so that the mold and things don't grow on it, and then fermentation doesn't happen, and then all of a sudden, it can stay out there for months. So then our humans come in, we extract it. Now, I think that second part of the process kind of gets a little undermined by Minecraft, because, frankly, sure, it can get stored for a while, but, you get 1 bottle of honey maximum that can be stored in here, which is just there's really none. That's really nothing. You should be able to get multiple bottles, because if you wait a long time, because that way the honey can stack up, So I think that'd be cool. I think allowing you to grab 2 or 3 bottles, sort of like with the supers thing, where you take the supers, 3 of them in there, each one is a honey bottle, and yes, they are reusable. You can take them out, and you can put them back in, and they work again. So it wouldn't be that much of a hassle once you get them, but you gotta get them first. Yeah. So, I think the last main thing when it comes to bees is pesticides. Pesticides kind of suck. Bees numbers have been dropping like super fast. They've dropped like 54% in 1 year, like in bee colonies. So, yeah, these pesticides are kind of a big problem. So there was actually this study that figured out that spray on pesticides were the worst, and once to the soil were bad. But if you apply them to the seed, then it doesn't become as much of an issue because they're barely ever affected. So the main factors are the amount of nectar gathered, the toxicity, and the amount applied that affect the colony. Now, if we're looking at Minecraft, there's not really a pesticide. You don't really need to like spray things on your plants, or like they're not really pests. So why don't we do that? Now, I know this would be like super annoying for early game, but what if we had like a chance for the plants to, like your crops, to have like pests on them, and they'd become like sickened or weakened or something. And so what you could do is, I mean, it would slow down their growth, and they'd produce less crops. But, and like they might, some of them might have a chance to die. But the player can like build these little pest traps to like capture pests. So if they put them like on the perimeter of fields, now there will be a lower chance of plants getting like having pests in them. But it's not perfect. And then they should have like a spray on. So like you could do a splash potion or like a little bottle that you can just sort of like yeah. They could spray on plants and apply to them, and then they would become like pest resistant. Well, yeah, pest resistant because the pesticide would be on there, and so that would, you know, kill the pests. And it'd just be like a simple item. You can make it with like I guess water and like a water bottle, and maybe like a splash potion or something to just like, yeah, make the chemical pretty easy. And this would be super cool because now it's not just like, I feel like crop farming is also a bit undertouched because bees exist, but bees are helpful for crops, but you don't really need bees in a crop farm. So first off, adding this pest system would be super cool because now you have to like take care of your crops, make sure they're all like getting the pesticides and getting the care they need to make sure that you're getting maximum production. But if we also have bees able to pollinate crops, which could allow them to sort of reproduce onto nearby like tilled soil. So if I'm like broke and I have like one wheat seed, and then the bees come, they can like sort of make it so that the wheat seed is able to reproduce onto nearby like tilled soil. And then that way it could help, you know, newer players out with farming because they'd be like, all right, I should farm like right here. And then the bees would pollinate and help, you know, spread those, like allow them to reproduce, which would be very nice. And then also that would be like, it would be this choice where I could use it'd be a trade-off. I could use pesticides and protect my plants from getting protected 100%, like being damaged 100%. But now, if the bees try to pollinate one of those plants, they could die, basically. And so that would mean that you have to pick between bees helping you speed up your plant growth, or you know, pesticides that allow your plants to be 100% good. And the traps would be a good way to make sure that you can still like have pest resistance that's like not 100% perfect, but still pretty good, and have bees. So yeah, I think that'd add a lot more depth to Minecraft's crop farming, and it like tell players a thing or two about bees and a thing or two about crop farming. Because as of right now, like, let's go. Yeah, let's go over here. So right now, all of these crops are like perfectly grown. All I did was just put a few squares of water and then have like a mismatch of crops over here. There's no like soil nutrients, there's no like extra things going on. They're just sort of perfectly grown and they're fine here. This is boring. At this point, all crop farming is I just take the seeds, I go and then like leave, go do strip mining or something, come back, and then they're grown. That's kind of boring. That doesn't really teach anyone anything. That doesn't really have any gameplay. So this would be like, all right, now I'm gonna get my pest traps on the sides when I'm building my farm. Like, I don't know, for example, if this was pest trap, like right here, and like right here, and now like right here, and now these plants would be like protected slightly from pests. So now they'd be better. They'd like probably grow faster and like grow more undisturbed. And when I'm doing my farm setup, I'd also like have a beehive, and then like have to like have a beehive right here, and I could have it like, make me extra honey on the side. And then these bees, I'd like, have to move a hive, put it right here, get a thing set up, and then they could help pollinate. And then I'd like build a little field right here so that the bees can, produce nectar and stuff. And yeah, I think that would allow for a lot more like interconnecting of the different mechanics in Minecraft, from bees to crop farming. And then this new thing about like pests, I think that would be super cool. And then there should always, like, the pest trap shouldn't be too much to make, so that way, new players aren't going to like struggle super a lot at crop farming, so they can still use it as a source of food. But the pesticide is like, if you like, because you can spray pesticides both onto plants and onto soil. So if I were to like take, say this was a pesticide bottle, I'd be like, I could just like sort of put it right here. And then like, if it hit the soil, like this soil would now be permanently, safe, unless I like break the block. But, now, if a bee grabbed from the plant on that soil, it would die. Like after a few days, it would die. And then, that would be like, all right, well, I can either have my entire field permanently anti-pest, but also slower production because now I can't use bees, or I can, just do pest traps and like have them all around, but not like have a chance to not work. But then also, I can have the bees. And so that'd be super cool dynamic. That'd be super awesome. And I think the community would love that kind of update because it introduced a lot of new ideas to the game. By the way, according to the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation, their effects, like the pesticides, include removing important flora resources, causing subtle effects on reproduction, navigation, and memory, and they can also kill bees. So we're going to simplify that to just they kill bees, because I don't think that people want to, like, Mojang wants us to worry about, like, well, what are the different effects that could have, And so I think that'd be, like, it still gets the idea across that pesticides are bad for bees, but it also gets the, it's also simple, So I think that'd be a really great way. So all in all, at the end of the day, we got bees, and there's a lot of ways that they could be implemented in Minecraft better than they are now. That would also benefit other aspects of the game. Now the last aspect of bees, we got combat. So we know that bees have stingers. We know that bees will sting people. What happens if I punch a bee in Minecraft? Let's find out. Fudge, I cannot hit a bee. Now it's red, and all of the bees start attacking me.